Welcome back to Kings of the North on a Monday. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Stars and stumbles from week 4. We're going to talk about teams that blew our mind, players that blew our mind, teams with questions. We'll have our team of the week. We're going to tell the South how hard they can cram it based off this weekend, which, again, I don't know. We go on a scale of 1 to 1,000, Bill. I'd like to see the week where we're like, 84.
I don't think it'll ever be below like 750.
Yeah. So it's like we maybe could change the scale because it's like, all right, minimum this. So we'll do that. We'll have our top 11 and a half rankings, but we are going to start. And by the way, we want to wish happy birthday to our guy, John, who is turning 40 today and said, no way I'd rather celebrate than with KOTN telling the South to cram it. So this is a happy birthday, cram it.
I'm going to tack a few more points onto the cram-o-meter, I think, for John's birthday. Happy birthday.
Yeah. So, and thanks to everybody who's here live on YouTube. Thanks to everybody listening back on podcasts. People like to remind us to tell people to give us a thumb, to subscribe, to tell a friend. We want to continue to grow the nation of KOTN. Bill, this is one of our duties. We're going to do some things this week where, and I want to do this soon, is like, there are a lot of fan bases that I feel like are in a great place. So we want to celebrate. We want to help fans enjoy their teams. But when it is appropriate, I think one of our other duties, that's our primary duty. We want Northern college football fans to be the happiest they can be. We must also stand up for the North, particularly in situations when we feel like nationally or in the South, and that Southness seeping into a national conversation where they are ignoring Northern greatness. When Northern greatness is let me start that again. 3, 2. When Northern greatness is ignored, KOTN is there, right? That's a good little bite, right? That's what we're about. Yeah. Quit ignoring Northern greatness. So I have the swords nearby now. I don't want to have to wheel my chair back to reach for it. The swords are within striking distance at all times. That's a shift. We want to learn and grow on this show. Put the sword within arm's reach is one of the things I've learned.
Do you have like a sheath for those bad boys, or are they just lying there ready to roll?
They gave me cardboard sheaths, but my sister was here this weekend and I wanted to show her my KOTN room. And I did think to myself, she might cut her foot on a sword. So I probably do need to be more careful. And also this knob is nice and silver still. My other knob's getting a little, whatever happens to sword knobs. So I need to polish my knob at some point. So we'll do that on the show. Player who blew our mind. We're going to start with him because we are here to remind the world, and it might not even be a reminder because maybe we're telling, literally there are people in Tennessee who are like, I do not know who you're talking about. If you said this name to somebody in Alabama, they'd say, I don't know who that is. Kaleb Johnson, the Iowa running back, is one of the best players in college football, and we are going to talk about him in depth to start the show, Bill, because he is the player that blew your mind this week.
If someone in Tennessee or any place otherwise said, I don't know anything about Kaleb Johnson, I think you just say simply, he is the most explosive running back in college football. And I think that sums up his start to the season for Iowa. You can look at the stats too, and it'll tell you that, right? He leads the country in rushing yards. He's coming off of a game where he had 21 carries for 206 yards and 3 touchdowns and a win at Minnesota. A Minnesota team, by the way, that did a pretty good job of stopping Omarion Hampton, who maybe people know more about, who was considered one of the better running backs in the country coming into the season. I think Omarion Hampton averaged 4-ish yards per carry against Minnesota in the opener. Kaleb Johnson, I think, averaged 9 yards per carry against Minnesota. So if you want to compare it to, because there was somebody on Saturday night when we were talking about Kaleb Johnson that said in the chat, it was Minnesota, chill out. And it was okay, well, here's a comparative piece of data again for Minnesota against another really good running back and how much Kaleb Johnson outperformed it. He is not getting discussed at all. It is a little bizarre to me that he hasn't really broken through yet, and especially because people have been wanting to see more from Iowa, right? One of the major stories I thought coming into this college football season is what can Iowa do offensively to be even marginally better than it was last year. And this is the guy that's doing it for them, and he's doing it at an incredibly productive pace right now, and still no one is talking about him. So I was poking around some Heisman projections earlier on Monday and just did not see a whole lot of Kaleb Johnson, and he deserves to be part of that conversation.
He's at least on the board. When we talked about him on Saturday night, I could not find him on like as an option on a Heisman betting site anywhere. And he, as I look now at DraftKings, he's 100-1. So at least he's on the board. At least he's an option. He's the same odds as Kyron Drones, the Virginia Tech quarterback who was lost to Vanderbilt and Rutgers. That's what the world thinks of this. That's what the world, oh my God, my blood is boiling. Well, he's no Kyron Drones. Are you kidding me? Get in now. Get in now if you want to get in now. And like, is he going to win the Heisman? Are you going to win money on that? Maybe not. But this is a guy who, and like the opponent wasn't great, chill out argument is a little bit, to me, the same people who are like, why should we rank anything? Or the people who sort of think we shouldn't talk about college football until mid-October because the early games don't matter. And then it's like, well, then you're allowed to not participate because we understand, right? We get it. But also Minnesota's not Eastern Illinois. And your Amari and Hampton comparison is awesome because people, again, if people are going crazy for Hampton at UNC before the season, right? And he's no Kaleb Johnson. Let's talk about what Kaleb Johnson is. Mike made the graphic for us. He has 82 carries this season for 685 yards in 4 games. That 171 rushing yards per game is number 2 in the nation. He has 9 rushing touchdowns. That's tied for number 2 in the nation. And according to PFF, he has 444 yards. So 444 of his 685 is after contact. That's the most yards after contact of anybody in the nation. So we've had an Ashton Genty conversation. We're having other Heisman conversations. And this is not nonsensical to me. There's almost a part of this that's like, is a Boise State running back really going to win the Heisman, right? Or make it to New York? This is the Wisconsin case, but it's at Iowa. We know what this looks like, and it has appealed in the past at times to a voting populace. Ron Dane, 25 years ago, as a running back at Wisconsin, Wisconsin didn't win the national title that year. He won the Heisman. 10 years ago, Melvin Gordon was a Heisman finalist for a team that went 10-2 in the regular season and lost in the Big Ten title game. They were not a national championship contender, but Melvin Gordon had an extraordinary season, and he was a Heisman finalist. Through 4 games that year, Melvin Gordon at Wisconsin had 78 carries for 612 yards and 8 touchdowns. Kaleb Johnson right now has 82 carries for 685 yards and 9 touchdowns. So what probably has to happen, because there's 2 things to talk about here. Kaleb Johnson is an awesome player. People should know about him and watch him and talk about him and respect him. And then there's a Heisman case. One is facts, one is stats, one is how good you are on the field. It's indisputable. The other is narrative and perception and story of the season. We want to make sure we talk enough about how good he is. But in terms of like how people are viewing this, he does need to go crazy at some point. Melvin Gordon in September was not a Heisman candidate, but in November, he ran for 408 yards and 4 touchdowns against Nebraska. He set the single season rushing mark, and that got people's attention, right? So I do think he needs a wild game while stacking 170-yard games. But guess what?
Yeah.
They're off this week, and then he's going to get a chance because they play at Ohio State the next time they take the field. Now, do I think he's going to run for 408 yards against Ohio State? No. But he has an opportunity. And by the way, you don't have to do it against Ohio State because Bryce Love was a Heisman finalist from Stanford because he ran for a lot of yards against UCLA and Arizona State. Bryce Love. I didn't vote. I didn't have Bryce Love in my top 36 on my Heisman ballot that year. That boggled my mind. But there have not been a ton of running back Heisman finalists in the last 10 years. The only ones are Melvin Gordon, Christian McCaffrey, and Derrick Henry in 2015, and Bryce Love in 2017. So, like, it's a hard case to make. So you better be awesome. But gosh, this guy might be the guy to make the case because he's definitely awesome.
He is definitely awesome. I guess there is like I guess I will be playing a little bit of devil's advocate here when I mention some of this stuff.
Don't devil advocate yourself.
I'm not. I think when it comes like specifically to the Heisman case, there's like this guy is awesome. Yep. This guy's really fun to watch conversation, and then like specifically to the Heisman race, Kaleb Johnson is not the most efficient snap to snap, carry to carry running back. Like he is, like I said, he is the most explosive running back I think in college football. He has 12 rushes of 20 yards or more. There are 5 teams in the country that have more than that. He's better than the rest of them, but he is like, and Heisman voters aren't this discerning, but maybe they could retroactively apply it to their case if they just choose to ignore him. He's 55th in EPA per rush. Like okay. Ashton Jeanty is like top 5 in the country, I think. He's 123rd in rushing success rate. So there is a lot of
Mike. Can you cut off Bill's mic? Can you cut off Bill's microphone?
I'm just saying, there's a boomer
bust
principle here with Kaleb Johnson that is probably worth taking into consideration when pounding the table specifically for a Heisman case, but not for like entertainment value. Not for we need to be talking about this guy more because every carry there's an opportunity for him to take it to the house for 40 yards in a way that's just like really fun to watch. And he is also single-handedly like uplifted the Iowa offense. Well, not single-handedly, offensive line's blocking well too, but mostly single-handedly uplifted the Iowa offense. So like I think he has a case definitely for the Heisman Trophy, because the Heisman Trophy at the end of the day is about stat accumulation, and no one is accumulating them better at the position right now than Kaleb Johnson is. But if you really wanted to get into the nitty gritty of it, and I mostly mean like as a comparison to someone like Ashton Jeanty, who's very much part of the Heisman conversation, there are reasons why I think Ashton Jeanty's case is still more compelling than Kaleb Johnson's.
So I will say this. This is the burden that we carry in the North, because here's what I will guarantee. If there was a Southern show making a case for a Southern running back for the Heisman, they would not bring up his EPA per play in a way that negged his candidacy. They would ignore the facts that don't support their case, and they might even make up some facts along the way. I'm not sure they would know what EP per play is. I'm not sure I know what it is. I'm not saying I'm better than them. I'm saying you're better than them, but why are you doing it to us? Why you and your facts?
I mostly just do it to check myself, right? Because I don't want to. I over research everything, probably to a fault. But it's just like, as I was like looking for things to like make this case, I was like, well, I guess that's not part of it. I guess that's not part of it. So I just wanted to mention sort of my thought process as I was trying to look up some stuff for this conversation.
How about Big Strong Fast? How about Big Strong
Fast?
No,
listen, Big Strong Fast is not. We're not like there's not a bunch of physicists making the decision for the Heisman Trophy here, right? Big Strong Fast gets you a long way.
I would like that. That feels like a thing we could do at the end of the year. Maybe like second or third week in November is have on a physicist to talk about the Heisman race. How intrigued are you with the idea of Kaleb Johnson and this Iowa run game against this Ohio State defense in 2 weeks? So it's a platform for him, but also like regardless of whether it's a platform or not, it is a really effective back and run game against what should be one of the better defenses in the country. Like, do you think he will be explosive against Ohio State, or do you think Ohio State has a chance to sort of put the clamps on him?
I think Ohio State, if I had to pick one, I would probably pick Ohio State putting the clamps on him. And I actually don't know that I felt that before the show started, but then as you were rattling off Wisconsin running backs, I was reminded that those guys were awesome and like never did anything against Ohio State in Big Ten championship games. So it's like, okay, like I think I probably trust. And the other part of it too is I at some point, and I guess it's probably already happening, and Kaleb Johnson is doing it as successful regardless, but like there's still not much that's threatening about Iowa running the ball. So you can fully sell out to stop Iowa's rushing attack. About them
throwing the ball. Yeah. But nothing threatening about them throwing the ball. Yeah.
Throwing the ball. Excuse me. Yeah. So you can sell out to stop the rushing attack. And Minnesota tried that and it didn't work. I just think a team like Ohio State with its athletes would have a much more have a much better chance of being successful. Right. So I would lean toward maybe the train slows down a little bit against Ohio State.
Along those lines, Melvin Gordon, the year he was a Heisman finalist, in 11 of his first 12 games, averaged at least 5 yards per carry. And against Ohio State, he had 26 carries for 76 yards. 2.9 yards per carry in the Big Ten championship game. So to that point, I'm curious about it because I do think, I mean, certainly it was a couple years ago, but there have been times when Ohio State's given up big plays in the run game. And I just think he's enough of a profile and the Iowa offensive line is good enough that I don't know what I think about Ohio State's chances if he gets to the second level. And Lathan Ransom and Sonny Styles and Cody Simon and Caleb Downs, like that's one of those other things. Making tackles on him at the second level, right? Once he's through the hole, for everything that Caleb Downs does, and he's viewed as the best safety in college football, for Caleb Downs to be a Kaleb Johnson stopper, Caleb versus Caleb, Caleb versus Caleb. Like I think they're going to meet each other a few times, but this guy, big, strong, fast. I'm super intrigued by that because you're definitely going to have runs where now he's so good after contact, but he's also going to have moments where he hits a hole. And you see that with Iowa. They give him lanes sometimes. So then can Ohio State's back seven limit the yards after contact for him? And the only reason they wouldn't be able to is because maybe nobody can. But you're going to have times where Lathan Ransom and Sonny Styles and Cody Simon and CJ Hicks and Caleb Downs are going to be one-on-one with this guy having to bring him down. And I want to see what happens.
Yeah, no, I do too. I think you don't want to, and this was what PJ Fleck was talking about after the game. It was just that Kaleb Johnson had too much space. And like, if you give him a little bit of space, it's really hard for any safety to bring him down because he has incredible balance and he is very strong. Yeah. So if that's the case, if he can get 2 or 3 yards down the field against anybody, I like his chances. So Ohio State or anyone else. So we'll see. Do you have I don't know if you wanted to have this conversation or not, but like, would you have him on your ballot right now?
On a Heisman ballot?
Yeah.
When I and you and I are actually Heisman voters, when I actually vote for the Heisman, I will take Southern players into consideration. I will not eliminate them from my ballot. But at the moment, I don't think about them. So as I think about it now, I don't know that I'm all the way up on like where I need to be thinking about the best Southern players in the Heisman race. But I feel like right now, the two guys I'm pretty sure I would have on my ballot on a 3-man ballot are Travis Hunter and Kaleb Johnson.
Yeah. And I think it's those two and probably Ashton Genty. It seems like the leading candidates from Southern teams right now are Jalen Milroe and Cam Ward.
Oh yeah, I'm not. It's going to take a lot to get me on the Cam Ward bandwagon. Yeah. And it's just one of these things. Again, Texas may be creating a difficult situation because the guy Texas is the best team right now, but their starting quarterback's hurt. So now if their starting quarterback misses a couple games, and now you're like, okay, can Texas's starting quarterback win the Heisman if he only makes 8 or 9 starts? You know, so that's going to be weird. I just don't think Carson Beck is the guy. And then who else would it be at Georgia? Jalen Milroe, I'm certainly aware of and alert to, but yeah, because I mean, and I saw people, that's the Heisman. I saw some graphic for some outlet, and it was like their Heisman ballots, and it was all the exact same 3 people. And I think it was Travis Hunter, Cam Ward, and who?
Jalen Milroe. I think it's 4 guys. The 4 guys you will see are Travis Hunter, Ashton Genty, Jalen Milroe, and Cam Ward. I think it was on 3s that I saw that had like Ari and Andy and like maybe 3 or 4 other people. And I think maybe all of them had those same 4 players.
I would like to play a game because we own it here, right? We know who we care about, and we don't care about everybody. But if you're a national show and you care about everybody, I would like to play. Do you know who Kaleb Johnson is with some national people?
Yeah, I will say, like I said, I listen to some stuff. Friend of the program, Stephen Godfrey, did refer to Kaleb Johnson as a Heisman type running back on Split Zone Duo this week.
Yeah, he did. That's why he's going to be on Wednesday.
Yeah.
He's not going to be on to talk about Kaleb Johnson, but that's why Stephen Godfrey's on our show. Because he knows what's up. He's a man of the South, but he has the brain of the North, you know? So look for Stephen Godfrey to join us on Wednesday after Dan Wetzel joins us on Tuesday. And we got some requests out. We got requests out for players and coaches in the North, and I'm looking at my email. I don't have responses yet, but I got fingers crossed on Nardog. So we'll tell you that this week. And I asked for Kaleb Johnson. Iowa's off this week, so I asked Iowa for Kaleb Johnson or anybody associated with the Iowa run game because we like to talk about it. We would also like to talk about it with them. All right. That's the guy who blew your mind. He also blew my mind. But the guy who blew my mind also is Josiah Stewart at Michigan. And I am going to continue to compare Michigan to 2021 Michigan because that was a successful team with limitations that found a way to win. And I'm not saying this. He's not Aiden Hutchinson. But if you're going to be a run, and I don't even want to say offensively run first team, a run only team, and then you're going to lean on your defense, you've got to get after quarterbacks. And so it's like, oh, well, Michigan did all this. And it's like, and they had a guy, Aiden Hutchinson's like destroying the NFL right now.
Yeah.
He destroyed college football in 2021. He had 74 pressures in 14 games that year. He was the highest graded defensive player in the country by PFF. And he was second in pressures in the country that year behind Will Anderson. He was a game wrecker. Josiah Stewart right now by PFF is the highest graded defensive player in the North. I love doing our 28 team. Just search it on PFF. He had a career high pressures against USC. I think he had 8. He and Derek Moore had 6. And I think they are JV Hutchinson and Ojabo from 2021, what Moore and Stewart can do right now. And it changed the game. And they did not do a good job as a team pressuring Quinn Ewers against Texas in week 2. And they got after Miller Moss in week 4. And it changed the game. And he's also playing a lot more. So this is what we talked about, the idea of Michigan last year. They worked a lot of guys in. Josiah Stewart had been a transfer from Coastal Carolina where he had been a full-time guy. But last year, he averaged 23 snaps a game. He played a high of 36 snaps in the national championship game because he wasn't a starter. He played 53 snaps against USC, high motor, after Miller Moss the whole game. He had a sack on USC's second drive on 2nd and 5 that blew up that drive, forced a punt. Michigan scores the first touchdown of the game offensively. Complimentary football. He blew up a screenplay later in the game, and he had some nice pursuit on some run plays. I thought he was super impactful. And if that's what you were waiting for, like the ways that you're looking to see how Michigan can win, I think you need to see that defensively. And I'm at the point now, Landis, we know how good Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham are inside at defensive tackle. And just the way they look. I just like to look how Michigan looks sometimes pre-snap. Pre-snap Michigan offensively, you're like, that's Michigan. Pre-snap defensively, they have those 2 monster tackles, and then Moore and Stewart, more often than not, are standing up. Menacing, man. Menacing. And I thought his impact, it elevates what Michigan can be. And I thought Josiah Stewart was awesome and a game wrecker on Saturday. And if he's that, then okay.
I think Josiah Stewart has the chance, if you include this Michigan season in the run of the last 3 years, to be probably the second best edge rusher behind Aiden Hutchinson that Michigan's had. Like I know David Ojabo was really good too and super athletic. I really like what I've seen from Josiah Stewart. I will admit I was a little bummed that neither of the ends had much of an impact against Texas. Texas also might have the best offensive line in college football, so it's not like there wasn't a reason for it, but these guys were also both really good against Fresno State. Like I thought of all the Michigan players that kind of popped in that game, I thought it was both edge rushers against Fresno State that were kind of like, whoa, that's interesting. Not something I was expecting. And then obviously very good against USC. So no, there's potential there, especially for Josiah Stewart, who I think can give you a little more. Like there's been times this year where he's dropped out in the coverage and like played some stuff really well, like in the flats that has impressed me. He's a fairly versatile player that I think Wink Martindale will continue to do a lot with. So he earned it this week to be on this segment for sure. Yeah.
Motor, athlete, got after it. By the 3rd drive, they were starting to double him and chip him. And it was like, okay, here we go. Like you can see that. But then on the Will Johnson pick 6, if you watch it, Josiah Stewart, so Miller Moss is looking to his left, right? So he's looking right over his left tackle to make that throw. And Will Johnson reads it the whole way. But Josiah Stewart off the snap beats the left tackle with an inside move immediately. And Miller Moss knows it because that's where he's looking anyway. And I think it might have helped him like, okay, I better get rid of this thing. So it was pressure and coverage working together that it's an unbelievable individual play by Will Johnson, but Josiah Stewart made Miller Moss throw that right away and did not give him another second to think about it, because if he would have thought about it, Josiah Stewart would have been in his lap. So like this is like impact. Stats are nice. Pressure stats are nice. Aiden Hutchinson in 2021 had 16 pressures through 4 games. Josiah Stewart has 15 pressures through 4 games. So like that's nice. Go watch the game. And circle the moments, the 3, 4, 6 moments in the game where Josiah Stewart's presence created something. And I thought, like you can see the Michigan pieces, man. They don't have all the pieces, but sometimes you have a board game at home and you get it out and you love to play it, and then like a year later you get it out and you're missing a couple pieces. It doesn't mean you can't play.
Yeah,
you just know that, like, oh yeah. You could never go over that bridge. We lost the gumdrop bridge card in Candyland. And it's like, oh, I guess we can't play Candyland. It's like, that's not what it means. Michigan's playing Candyland. They're just not going to the gumdrop bridge. But like now when you go around the gumdrop bridge, Josiah Stewart's waiting for you. And then when you climb the candy cane fountain, Kaleb Mullings is waiting for you. Like there are pieces. There are still good pieces there. All right. Team that changed my mind. This is not in a good way. I like this category because it can go either way. So we did guys that blew our mind. That's always positive. Team that changed my mind. It could be they're better than I thought or they're worse than I thought. I put my bets on Twitter. I don't only want to show bets after I win. I want to show them before. So I bet like Syracuse minus 26.5 and Syracuse minus 33.5. I was like, I'm going to hit this. 13-1, given 5 touchdowns against Stanford. I am all over this Syracuse. Then no, it didn't happen. Syracuse played a terrible game. And it changed. The honeymoon's over. That's all.
Yeah.
And it's more about me and everybody else who was fired up for Syracuse, but the honeymoon is over. 2 bad picks by Kyle McCord, and he took responsibility for them after the game. And the second pick, especially when he just stared down a corner on a wheel route, and he was like, I don't know what I was doing there. It was first down. I have no idea why I forced that. I should have taken the throw in the flat. So he's not trying to take anything away. But Fran Brown, after the game, and again, like they accepted the loss, I think, in the correct way. So I don't think Syracuse is on tilt. I don't think this loss will lead to another loss, but they blew it. They're better than Stanford, and they blew it. Fran Brown said after the game, they got out-coached. He said he thought the players were kind of even, and they got out-coached, and I agree. They did get out-coached. And there is an unforgivable thing that happened that on 4th and 9, late in the game, Syracuse is ahead. Stanford's driving on 4th and 9, a do-or-die play in the final minute, and they have one great offensive player. Alec Iomanor, right, is their great receiver. He's their only guy. They play single coverage on him on 4th and 9, and their average quarterback hits a back shoulder throw to him to convert a first down, and it sets up the game-winning field goal. And everybody after the game was like, why did you play single coverage there? And Fran Brown was like, well, if you look, initially when they came out, they had Iomanor on one of Syracuse's best corner to the field, so Fran Brown called timeout. So they didn't like the matchup, and they called timeout. And when they came back out, they were like, we're still going to single the only good Stanford offensive player. And now they like the matchup better because it wasn't on Jaden Bellamy. It was on Clarence Lewis, who's a Notre Dame transfer and their best corner. So Fran Brown said, like, we believed in him one-on-one. They rushed 3 against 6 blockers. They have 8 guys in coverage against 4 guys in the route. They have 3 linebackers sitting in the middle of the field covering air. They have a single high safety in the middle of the field who can't get to the sideline. And they have a corner in one-on-one coverage. I checked the PFF stats on this, Landis. I'm not saying they're 1,000% accurate, but zone coverage versus man coverage, according to PFF, Iomanor had 2 targets versus man coverage in that game. He had 12 targets versus zone coverage. He had 5 catches for 41 yards on the 12 targets versus zone. The 2 man coverage targets, he made a one-handed touchdown grab and a 4th and 9 catch on the sideline to save the game. And Fran Brown was like, yeah, we like the matchup. We just thought we'd put it on our guy. Triple team that guy. 3 linebackers covering air. You dropped 8 against 4, and you wound up with a one-on-one matchup against an All-American level receiver. It is mind-boggling. I hope it is a learning moment.
Mm-hmm.
It is like the single worst defensive coverage decision, I think, that I have seen in a long time in a key moment. It is 1000% indefensible that's what Syracuse decided to do there. And maybe it's a first-year head coach, first-year staff. They called the timeout.
Yeah.
To get that look. It was better than the look they had before, but nobody on the sideline was like, I don't know, they only have one player. Should we double him? It's Stanford. It's not Ohio State. They have one guy. I thought it was, and they should have never been in that position. They couldn't run it. Like they made terrible mistakes. It's a terrible loss. Teams have terrible losses. I don't think they're a terrible team. I don't think they're a terrible coaching staff. In the moment, it is a terrible loss.
It's really bad. Yeah. Some warts, I think, came out for Syracuse in this game. None of which are terribly surprising. Like that offensive line was eventually going to get tested, and it didn't handle Stanford very well. Syracuse has to run the ball better, and the penalties were an issue in that game. And on one hand, I'm like, okay, like I'll more often than not probably get behind a staff like really kind of empowering its players and being behind its guys or whatever. But Syracuse is such a roster in flux that like I don't think you can have an our dudes versus their dudes kind of mentality, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Like you need to be more direct in trying to stop the only threatening player. And I guess you could say in that particular situation, maybe Ashton Daniels' legs are also threatening. So like spy him and then cover Alec Iomanner with 6 other guys and see if that doesn't win you the game.
Because you know what else Syracuse talked about after the game? They talked about how they had a hard time getting the ball to their best pass catcher, Oronde Gadsden. You know why? Because he was doubled the whole game.
Yeah.
They had proof. They're talking about it's like, hey, how come your guy didn't do anything? Yeah, they doubled him. What do you want to do against the Stanford guy? Man, we're good.
We got it.
We got it. Awful. By the way, I'm always on alert for this stat now, thanks to you. Kyle McCord versus pressure versus not pressure. PFF rankings for just week 4. Against pressure, he was the number 2 rated quarterback in the nation. When he was clean, he was the 43rd rated quarterback. So typically it's McCord versus pressure. It was he just made mistakes with no pressure on him that killed him. But it wasn't which I think is actually better because it's like, well, that's not his history. If it was like, here we go again, Kyle McCord, when he's pressured, it does not as good. That wasn't it. He handled the pressure just like he made 2 inexcusable throws when he didn't have pressure. And so, but the whole point of that is your quarterback who has carried you and been awesome through 2 games, made a couple bad decisions. You still should have won anyway. You absolutely should have won anyway. So I put this on the coaches. All right. Who's the team that changed your mind?
I think it's West Virginia, and we talked a little bit about West Virginia on Saturday, and this is for me mostly a conversation about Garrett Green and him. I think just kind of rediscovering what he was last year and the reason why we thought West Virginia could be dangerous coming into this season. And I know you mentioned the quote on Saturday that Neil Brown said the difference in the game was we got Garrett Green and they don't, and I think that is a apt summarization of what happened there. But it was also kind of the way that Garrett Green played. It wasn't merely that he simply played well. This was what he needs to be, both running and passing, right? We saw the scrambles at the end of the game on that final drive where they scored a touchdown and take the lead. He had more design runs in this game. He had 5, in fact, design runs in this game, which were the most for him in any game this season. Throwing the ball 10 yards or more down the field, he was 10 of 16 for 215 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And I was looking on Sports Info Solutions at air yards per attempt. He was at 3.4 air yards per attempt in games against Penn State and Pitt. He was at 6.5 in this game against Kansas. So he doubled it. That was actually more than last year too. Last year for the season, he was 5.5. So this was Garrett Green, designed runs, Garrett Green scrambling, Garrett Green throwing the ball down the field. And I was just a little uncertain whether or not he would ever get back to that because I just think he was kind of playing outside of himself to start the year. So the fact that he found that in this game, got a huge win for West Virginia against Kansas. I'm not like back on the West Virginia is going to win the Big 12 train, but I think I am back on the West Virginia is dangerous in the Big 12 train, because I was pretty much off of it after what I saw against Penn State and Pitt.
Don't you think this happens though? I think that was purposeful because he was runs and shots last year.
Mhm.
It's sort of like free throws and threes.
That's right.
In
Dunks
basketball.
and layups and threes. Yeah.
Layups. And so then when you get more experience, and I think they want teams and coaches and quarterbacks want to add nuance, they want to add a mid-range game to their offense. And it's like, well, we want to be more than that. And then it doesn't work. And it's like, run and chuck. What are we doing? And so at some point, it's like, why are we taking contested 17-footers when that's not who we are? Get to the rim and fire away. So I understand why they did it, but if it didn't work, I'm glad they backed off of it, because maybe more nuance to Garrett Green's game is like the Heisman playoff path, but less nuance, dunks and threes is probably the path to at least win the games you should win and not blow a 10-point lead in the final 3 minutes kind of thing. So like maybe they can get back to it, but God bless them. I appreciate the try. Penn State was awful. It was awful. Didn't work at all. And you don't have to give up right away, but they got back to what they know to win. So good for them.
Yeah. And you started to see it a little bit, I thought, at the end of the backyard brawl. Obviously didn't win them that game, but then it was just a continuation of Garrett Green, I think, like kind of realizing where his bread is buttered, and that was why they got the win against Kansas.
You know where my bread is usually buttered? At the sink. You do a lot of like the knives are there, right? We've talked about this. The most real thing that I've ever seen anyone tweet in the history of the world is shout out to everybody who leaves the knife on the corner of the kitchen sink just in case you need to use it later in the day. And I was like, does someone have a camera in my house? So I usually take the butter over there, because sometimes, do you eat a piece of buttered bread at like 3:00 in the afternoon? Sometimes,
yeah.
Sometimes it's the only thing you want, isn't it?
You toast it, or you just you're going?
I'm going raw dog
bread,
that.
raw bread.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's the Garrett Green in me. Maybe I want to be a little more sophisticated and toast it, and then I'm like, what am I doing? I set the bread on fire in the toaster. It's like, why am I doing this? Let's get back to who I am. Dunks, threes, and buttering bread by the sink. When we come back, we will talk about our teams of the week. We'll have our cram-o-meter. We'll have our top 11.5 rankings, all of that and more. Next on Kings of the North. Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. We'll get to our teams of the week. Just want to remind you, you can follow us on Instagram. You can follow us on Twitter, KOTNCFB. Tell a friend. We'd love to help you have you guys, this core loyal audience, help spread the word a little bit. We have Monday through Thursday at noon on YouTube Live. We have the Saturday night post-game show at 11 p.m. We have a Friday morning betting show, Bets of the North, with Tyler Shoemaker, and we just want to build on this, Landis, right? Like we're like a month in, and I think we like where we are, but we would like to expand. We'd like to grow a little bit, right?
We would, and I think the games are going to help us get there too. We're getting to the conference play, so no more cupcake games for anybody, really. So that'll be good.
Yeah. No, so we're excited. All right, so this is not a cupcake game. My team of the week is what BYU did. BYU is my team of the week. Holy moly. Just so much respect for what is happening at BYU. I think we can, again, it's like I love talking about the show on the show. It's like you and I think coming into this year had a lot of questions based off evidence from last year of, Are Cincinnati and BYU right for the Big 12? Is this a fit? Is it a bridge too far? Is it a step too high? I don't know. And BYU and Cincinnati so far are showing us like we're good. It was a bumpy year one, but we're good. For BYU to do what it did to Kansas State on Saturday night was remarkable. And I love Kalani Sitake is a real dude. I love his quote after the game. We're not going to surprise anybody anymore. So it's like they know what's up, but I think they are not calling them games. They're calling them statements. So they're like, that was statement 4. Next week we have statement 5. And so they are in a beautiful spot, and they did get some luck. And we're going to talk about Kansas State later. But I'm always intrigued by what you're supposed to do. And this happened with a couple teams this week. What you're supposed to do when your best players make back-breaking mistakes. And so Kansas State did that, and BYU took advantage of it. And I think everybody knows this now, but from like 1:02 left in the first half or something like that, like the final 90 seconds of the first half, 2 turnovers by Kansas State that led to BYU touchdowns, and then another turnover early in the third quarter led to another BYU touchdown. So they scored 21. Then they got a crazy punt return for a touchdown, but they also like played good ball. So there was a lot of craziness. Jake Retzlaff took care of the ball. Kalani Sitake was really excited about that, but he also made an awesome throw to cash in a turnover right at the end of the first half, like took a shot to Chase Roberts and converted that. Jay Hill, the defensive coordinator who had a heart attack this year, as we talked about it, havoc, absolutely creating chaos. And they had Avery Johnson's head spinning in that game. And then I love this. They had this crazy punt return where the guy muffed it and then ran 190 yards to run a punt back for a touchdown. Kalani Sitake said, I saw a mistake. And I saw a mistake made right. We can block for him without the drama. So like it was like he liked it, but he didn't like it that much. They played their backup running back, and he played great. And Kalani Sitake was like, I told you our running back room was good. They were down really 2 running backs. They were down 2. They played like their third string running back. And they've been really good in the red zone. They held Kansas State on 2 long drives early on to field goals. They've given up 11 trips into the red zone as a defense this year. Only 3 touchdowns on those 11 trips. 3 touchdowns, 5 field goals, 3 stops. They beat SMU earlier this year by giving up 0 touchdowns. So like a defense that stands up when it matters, and the fans were nuts.
Oh, yeah.
They threw it back to 96, and the fans helped them win that game. Like, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. BYU, this is the kind of thing I want to do more on the show. BYU and Boston College are reminding me of each other right now. Like, nobody else in the country is going to make that comparison. This is like programs that have great histories. They both have Heismans, but they're not top tier. They're probably not even tier 2. They are certainly capable of having down seasons. But there is a lot of belief there right now, and the fans are there for it. And so what BYU, just from a fan base perspective, it's not just team of the week, it's program, culture, community, fan base of the week is BYU, man.
I thought that environment at Lavelle Edwards Stadium was the best I've seen so far this year.
Awesome.
Watched a couple of big games. Like, that place was rocking, and it looked cool. Like the white uniforms at home, I always think that's a cool look for BYU. 2 things I'll add on to what you said. One, I don't think Jay Hill is long for BYU. I think he might be
former Weber State coach. So it's one
very
of the things,
successful
you're a head coach.
Weber State. Yeah.
Havoc. They are getting after people, aren't they?
Well, that's the other thing. Last year, BYU was all they talked about in the offseason. Last year, we got to get to the quarterback more. BYU was 126th in the country in pressure rate last year. Do you know where they are currently?
Top 50.
Number 1.
Getting 126 to 1. Getting after it. They had, and this is our friend Shahan always says this, like, they had Kansas State in hell, man. Kansas State didn't know where they were coming or going. Avery Johnson's head was spinning. Incredible credit. And again, I like when coaches say this. Kalani Sitake first thing he said when he came in post-game news conference, thank the fans. It was motivating for our players. That's that connection. It's real. And those fans helped BYU win that game. So that's my team of the week. Who's your team of the week?
The other half of the Holy War, Utah. When's that game, by the way? That's in November, right?
Utah. I'll check flights.
I think it's in November. I think Utah, by going on the road and beating Oklahoma State in the fashion that it did with its backup quarterback, without two key defensive players, proved to everyone that it is the class of the Big 12. I think that there is a tier where Utah is now by itself, and then the second tier is pretty close. I think it's the nature of the conference that there is some parity there. But a lot of us, I think, thought that Utah was going to be the best team in the Big 12 this year. And in the early goings of conference play, obviously, I think Utah has backed that up. And I think there's a couple of things at play with Utah now. Like, one, you got to figure out what's going on with Cam Rising and when exactly he'll be back. I think myself and a lot of people do find it annoying that Kyle Whittingham is not more forthright with that information, because it just makes it hard to kind of project Utah moving forward. But I think with the way that Isaac Wilson played, there's now a path forward kind of regardless of what happens there, and they can keep building on that. And then the other thing, too, is just how good Utah's defense has been. You come to expect it of Utah, but this has been a fairly stingy defense so far this year. Forced 3 and outs against Oklahoma State on 7 of Oklahoma State's possessions. It is currently number 11 in defensive efficiency. It is number 7 in available yards. It is number 3 in first down rate. It is incredibly difficult defense to move the ball against. And I think Oklahoma State learned that on Saturday, and the rest of the Big 12 will learn it this year.
November 9th, Utah at BYU. What are you doing?
I think I'm going to go to Utah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't tease me. Don't tease me. I kind of want to be there because you know why? The state of Utah owns college football right now. I'm pretty sure this is right. I went through it's like one of these things, me doing math, who knows? But I went through all the states that have at least 2 power conference teams. So if you're just one team and your team's really good, but you had to have at least 2 power conference teams. And no offense to anybody who's not a power conference team. 2 states are undefeated that have multiple power conference teams. Utah with BYU and Utah is 8-0, and Pennsylvania with Pitt and Penn State is 7-0. Does that sound right to you? That sounds right, right? All that's right so far, right? Okay. Yeah. So then we have Iowa and Ohio are 6-1. And if I'm going to just a little quick geography thing here, Landis, what do Utah, Pennsylvania, Iowa, and Ohio all have in common?
They're in the north.
Oh, they're in the north. What do you know about that? 6-2, Illinois, Michigan, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. 8-3 for Indiana, state of Indiana, with Purdue, Indiana, and Notre Dame. Purdue's kind of dragging that down. Also, Northern Illinois, Notre Dame, drag that down. 5-2 for Arizona, Georgia, Kentucky, Alabama, and South Carolina. 10-5 for Florida and North Carolina. 18-10 for Texas, and 5-3 for Mississippi and Virginia. I would like to restate for the record that the state of Utah is 8-0 and the state of Florida is 10-5. I would like to restate for the record that the state of Utah is 8-0 and the state of Florida is 10-5. And before they ask, no, South, you can't have Utah. Utah's in the north.
That's
How about
right.
that? Take that.
10-5.
California is 8-5 and Kansas is 4-4. Kansas, we added Kansas late. Where's that? Sorry about that.
You could have cut off the graphic. You could have cut off the graphic.
I know. Well, why don't see? This is what we're doing again. Why do we have to have all the facts? Why can't we just have partial facts in there?
Right.
Just like this is a chart of the good northern states and the bad southern states, and we're ignoring the other things that we don't like. Really good. So, congrats to Utah and BYU, and like. This is everybody does this in September, and we're as guilty of it as anybody. It's like a team wins 2 games, and you're like, ho, let's look ahead to October 24th. Could these teams be undefeated? And then it's like, no, Syracuse lost. No, Nebraska lost. No, like, so we're not going to do that. We are not going to sit here and say Utah versus BYU, undefeated holy war in November. We would not say that.
No, also check the record. Team of the week has been a kiss of death. So. I think our teams of the week after week 1 were Penn State and Notre Dame, and then Notre Dame turned around and lost Northern Illinois, and then Kansas State was one of the teams of the week last week after beating Arizona, and they lost to BYU. So I don't think the track record's great with team of the week. You want to avoid being team of the week, I think, on Kings of the North.
And we also had on Jason Candle, the Toledo head coach, after beating Mississippi State, and they lost to Western Kentucky on Saturday.
Yeah.
Which when I was like, hey, what do you think about making the playoff? And Jason Candle said, like, I'm going to murder you. We're just trying to win our next one. And it's like, coaches, you coaches are crazy. Just win the next one. It's like, oops, sorry. Boston College has Western Kentucky next. So it's like, now we have to be on alert for like Western Kentucky, Northern feel-good story beater. Who knew? Who knew that we were going to be this worried about Western Kentucky this season? Okay. Team with questions. Mine is Nebraska, and here's why. I don't like leaning into cliches, but cliches are true. Cliches happen because there's truth to them. And for Nebraska, like once again, to lose a one-score game, to lose in overtime to Illinois, they're now 7-26 since 2019 in games decided by one score, and Matt Rule is 1-6. So it's like, this is what got Scott Frost fired. Scott Frost was 5-22, but Matt Rule is 1-6. And so it's like, okay, I don't think it's, and their only wins against Northwestern in like an 8-point game last year. It's like everything that's been close. So that's like I don't want to put that on Nebraska. I believe that year 2 of Matt Rule, Dylan Raiola, some of the talent they added, I don't want to put the past on Nebraska. But then when you bring the past back to life, I don't know what to do. So like they hung this back around their neck. It's another albatross of like, okay, now go win a close game so we can stop talking about this, because they kind of blew it against Illinois.
Yeah, they did. I mean, if Dylan Raiola completes that pass in the fourth quarter to a wide open tight end, they probably win, right? And then they don't hit that wide open touchdown and they miss the field goal. It's like, okay, maybe the universe just doesn't want you to win games like this, right?
So, but here's the thing. So this is one of those, again, now it does feel like a curse. So Matt Rule talked about that after the game. It's a 3rd and 3 with like 3 minutes left. And he said the play call on the design on that is for a throw to the fullback in the flat. And that's what it always is. But their other like offset tight end just released completely free off the line of scrimmage. He said like that guy never comes open like that. And he said Dylan Raiola has such good vision that he saw it. And the guy was wide open. So Raiola took it. When that's not, it's like, why are you throwing to the end zone on 3rd and 3? It's like, we're not. There's just 4 things in the route, and we never thought that was going to be a thing, except it was so wide open and he missed him. But also the guy he's throwing to there has 1 career catch.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things like, oh, if only you make a better throw. And it's like, well, you are throwing to a guy with 1 career catch, a backup tight end. But then they kicked the field goal with the backup kicker because their kicker was hurt. So it's just like, oh man, now this feels like cursed territory.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there was some criticism, I think, of that I actually did not know that about the play. It puts it in better context. There was some criticism, like if you're going to throw it on 3rd and 3, why are you kicking after that? Right. But if the design of the play is not to actually throw it into the end zone, that helps make a little more sense.
They lined up in a jumbo run formation, and then we're going to throw it in the flat. Now, to Dylan Raiola's credit, the fullback in the flat was covered. So it's like the first read, like they didn't trick anybody. So then if it's like, well, the play call is like, well, the first read was completely. So they were, but then they didn't go for it. But again, it adds to it, like with the backup kicker, like, it's a backup kicker. So why are you even putting yourself in this situation? So you miss a 39-yard field goal. Now, to Nebraska's credit, they then stopped Illinois. So Illinois didn't win it in regulation, but you go to overtime, and then Dylan Raiola, just as a freshman quarterback, kind of loses it in overtime and gets sacked a bunch. But it was right there. The winning moment was there. And Matt Rule had a quote, I thought we had a really hot offense there for a while, and they couldn't get off the field defensively to give the ball back to Dylan Raiola. So there's like some complimentary football stuff there of like, it's not all the way. Like the freshman QB was kind of doing his thing and they couldn't get him the ball enough. So they wind up losing that game. So I never would have come into the season talking about Nebraska losing close games, because I didn't think that was relevant to this year. That's the past. And now they brought it back. So now I have to talk about it. So that's my question. Can they win close games?
Yeah. I mean, I thought Dylan Raiola played well. We talked about whether or not they're going to let him rip, or whether or not whether or not it was the best course of action. They kind of did, and I thought he looked pretty good doing it. So I guess take that from it. But yeah.
All right. Team with questions for you is what?
It's Kansas State, and I think just a question of, I don't know. you can tell me if I'm making too much of one game, but I am left very much wondering if Avery Johnson is quite ready for this. Like long term, believe in him still very much so. He's still a dynamic runner, and I think you see enough flash when he throws the ball to think that like one day that can be pretty good. I don't think it's very good right now, and there have been times in every game where it's looked like he is very much in over his head, and like this was the worst of it on the road against BYU, against the swarming defense in a tough environment. Like a lot of the circumstances, I think help make that make sense. But this is a team that we thought should be and would be in the conversation for a Big 12 title, and losing once doesn't remove them from that. But there's been enough up and down play with Avery Johnson that I just don't know if he's going to get to a place he needs to get to for Kansas State to actually win the league. It was an underwhelming performance by a pretty exciting young quarterback who just didn't quite look ready for the moment.
Bad picks, pressured on a screen and threw it right to a BYU edge guy who had dropped in coverage, and then steps up in the pocket and tries to rip it down the middle and just like does not see the linebacker lurking in the middle of the field. And again, it's one of those things. So what are you supposed to do if you're Kansas State? They gave up 21 points in like 5 minutes of game action because their all Big 12 running back DJ Giddens fumbled, scoop and score, and then their highest rated recruit in the world that they turned the program over to a quarterback through 2 terrible picks that both turned into touchdowns. So it's like, hey, Chris Kleiman, what was your game plan? It was like, I don't know, maybe not have our best players who constantly have the ball in their hands hand BYU 21 points. So I am a moron. But my selections of 2 second-year quarterbacks as my number 1 and number 2 Heisman guys, are you kidding me? Jackson Arnold got benched, and Avery Johnson looked like he wasn't ready for it. Like, to Avery Johnson's credit, at least he didn't get benched. So
well, they can't bench him. Yeah, they can't bench Avery Johnson.
So
that's the other issue. Yeah,
I'm a moron. I missed really badly on that one. So like super interested in Oklahoma State this week. Like, again, for everything we think Oklahoma State is not, they're a competent football team. They're a well-coached, competent football team that's going to play a little defense. And so, they've got like, this is like, are you alert for like any on tilt with Kansas State? Or do you think they just chuck this one, forget about it, and they'll be good?
A little bit. Because Oklahoma State's going to come after Avery Johnson too. So like now you've gone through this now. Okay, how do you adjust? And maybe you just adjust by running the ball, right? Like running Avery Johnson, running DJ Giddens, running Dylan Edwards. That's probably a fine response, but there's a lot to be desired there with the ability to throw the ball with Avery Johnson in Kansas State right now.
Yeah. All right. Game that you were glad you saw.
Similar conversation, I think, for me. It's the Notre Dame Miami Ohio game. If only to get a sense of like how locked in Notre Dame is on what is effectively now like an option offense with Riley Leonard. They are I think just fully gone into the idea of our best course of action is to run this guy. He was the Notre Dame's leading rusher in this game. He had 9 designed carries for 130 yards. He ran 12 times overall for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was 16 of 25 passing for 154, and he did throw his first passing touchdown of the season. But he still looks very much hesitant as a guy when asked to throw the ball down the field. And maybe at this point, he just sort of is who he is, and there's no way out of that. So this is what Notre Dame has to be moving forward. I think we're now in the same conversation we were in with Michigan, which is like, this looks pretty good against some teams. Can it beat the best teams on your schedule conversation? Yep. And Notre Dame has Louisville coming up. It's got games down the road, obviously against USC, less so Florida State at this point. But this offense has just not really evolved to what I thought it was going to be, and neither has Riley Leonard. So I guess credit to Notre Dame for like sort of leaning into what is working, but I don't know if it gets them to where they thought they were going to go this year.
Sounds like, right? So are you West Virginia, chuck the nuance, get back to what Garrett Green does well. Are we suggesting Avery Johnson and Kansas State chuck the nuance and just let that guy run? And has Notre Dame chucked the nuance and is going to just run Riley Leonard? Like, is this where we are? This is how you try to win.
Yeah, I think that is very much where Notre Dame is. And I'm wondering, like, I didn't check much of the post-game coverage, but like watching the way that Riley Leonard was reacting to some of that on the field, he didn't always seem like the most thrilled guy in the world to be running the ball as much as he was, but that's on him, man. Throw the ball better. They won't ask you to run so much. So there's somebody else to blame but yourself. But he ran it well against Miami, Ohio. So
okay. All All right, the game that I was glad I saw is Boston College, Michigan State, and I sort of talked about this before, just like where Boston College is as a program. Pouring rain, sellout crowd of 44,500. They stormed the field after beating Michigan State. Bill O'Brien is absolutely leaning into all of this, embracing the Boston College experience from top to bottom as a New England guy. Just so excited. Like, you think about where Boston College was from. Their head coach leaves to be a defensive coordinator in the NFL, and everybody in the world uses it as an excuse to write about guys don't want to coach in college anymore. NIL's too crazy. They just want to coach ball. And like, Boston College is this test case for, does anybody want to even coach anymore? And they get Bill O'Brien and they go down to Missouri last week and compete, and then they come home against Michigan State, and Thomas Castellanos throws a 42-yard touchdown pass to Lewis Bond with 1:28 left, and they win the game and storm the field in the rain during the red bandana game. Mm-hmm. Are you kidding me? This is awesome. I'm so happy for Boston College. Think of all those, like, that people had a game on Saturday night that they will talk about forever. Oh, yeah, I went to this game and it was pouring rain, but we stormed the field, and our guy threw a 42-yard touchdown in the final 2 minutes. Lewis Bond, who is awesome. Bill O'Brien said he thought Lewis Bond was open the whole game, and they should have done a better job of getting him the ball even more. But as Bill O'Brien said, great protection on that play from the offensive line. Thomas Castellanos, they said he liked the play in the huddle, and they just absolutely take advantage of it. And then Bill O'Brien says, great support. Students here are unbelievable. Like, I'm fired up, brother. I'm fired up for BC.
I thought like that was a pretty sparsely attended game because of the weather, but I actually thought that crowd was pretty good too. For what it was, for the circumstances. They did a nice job there at Boston College of making that a fun game to watch in the pouring rain that was not always aesthetically pleasing.
Really good. And just like super curious where BC goes from here. You find a way to win that game and you make the people who came out and stuck it out through the rain happy. All right. The game that bored you, Bill.
Bored me for all the right reasons. It's Indiana versus Charlotte. Indiana wins 52-14. It was 17-14 late in the first half. And then it was 35 straight points from Indiana, because that's what Indiana does. Like, what a credit to Indiana that I just like didn't want to pay much attention to this game at all, because it just felt like, they were going to run Charlotte off the field. And that's kind of what Indiana ended up doing. And I know that Charlotte's not great, but there was a time where you might feel a little uneasy going on a game like this if you were Indiana, and they just really handled their business. In the post-game press conference, someone asked one of those questions where you have like a super long preamble that just sort of like lays out all the facts of the question. And then with the juxt of it was like, you guys are off to a pretty good start, right? And Kurt Signani just said, I think it's a decent start. We're all right.
We're gonna have a good time. We're gonna have a good time with Coach Siggs. I also, my board game was the same thing. Like, good team, better than you expected. That is so good you don't pay attention to them. Pitt dropped 73 on Youngstown State, third most points of the Pat Narduzzi era. Pitt is 4-0 for the first time since 2000. And Pitt, I almost had a hard time believing this, but it's in Pitt's game notes. They are undefeated in non-conference play for the first time ever.
Ever?
Wow. I don't know what to say to that, but probably like credit to Pitt for scheduling real non-conference games. And so they didn't back into this either. They beat West Virginia and Cincinnati to be 4-0. So it's like, this is not because they scheduled 4 FCS teams. They're 4-0, but they're undefeated, man.
I guess there was a time when they were always playing Penn State and West Virginia, right? So I guess that helps.
Okay. Yeah.
That helps make a little more sense. Did you see the stuff of Pat Narduzzi and his dad?
No, tell me. No.
So Pat Narduzzi's dad was a former Youngstown State head coach. And so Pat Narduzzi dressed like his dad. He wore a shirt and tie for the game to like honor his father. But Pat Narduzzi's dad was also fired by Youngstown State. So Pat Narduzzi, this is his post-game quote. I asked them on Tuesday to go out and get one for my dad just to try to make it personal. They took the challenge and we went out there and tattooed him pretty good. My dad would have been fired up as he was watching up there.
That is wild. Okay. I'm not sure. Wow, that's good research by you. I kind of missed that. Okay. Wow. It's always one of those where it's like, oh, the place that employed me for so long, but they fired me in the end, so screw them. So like, yeah, we get how that works. Pitt off this week, catch their breath, then at North Carolina, home versus Cal, and then a Thursday night against Syracuse that we plan to be at. So like, and they didn't have Desmond Reed dressed, but then didn't play.
Was it like
our guy
workload management?
Yeah, so he didn't play at all, and Daniel Carter ran for 100 plus and had 2 touchdowns. Like his opportunity to shine. Mike, our Penguin Mike, the producer, Penguin Mike. We should call him Penguin Mike. Says his dad's in the Youngstown State Hall of Fame. Mike, Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he was. He got inducted in '96. He was a good coach there. I think Pat was a little upset. I'm almost positive too. He became the athletic director after.
How about that?
He was the coach as well. I'm reading his bio real quick.
That's okay. We're good.
Yeah,
we're back with our Youngstown State history lesson of the week. But also,
I mean, took a couple shots at the school where he's from. I'm like, come on,
as a Penguin, Mike. As a Penguin, Pat Narduzzi crammed it in your Hall of Fame. Are you like, did that hurt a little bit as a Penguin?
I mean, yeah, a little bit because like, remember where you're from. I mean, that's where he's from.
Yeah,
you know,
Youngstown State.
You wouldn't be here without Youngstown State. That's all.
Look, now we've got the edge in Mike's voice. Now we've got it. Oh, Nardog. I can't wait. I hope we have Nardog on this week. We'll unleash Mike on Nardog and see what happens. All right, Bill, the team that you are excited about.
When you throw a touchdown pass to an offensive lineman, you're going to get me excited. And that's what Illinois did. It is the fourth quarter. It is 4th and 2 from the 6th, and you're down by a touchdown. And what does Burt do? Puts out Henderson, second-year offensive lineman, tosses him a touchdown pass. And also, the route was clean. It was a great route from Brandon Henderson too. I might divert from block of the week and just do offensive lineman, big guy touchdown of the week based off how well he ran that route. But like Illinois is locked in. Like Illinois is an incredibly well-coached team. You've mentioned it before that how many winning plays Illinois makes and how it's had to do it in tight games against power conference opponents, both beating Kansas and now Nebraska. There are real dudes on both sides of the ball. And I also think you're seeing, I mean, you haven't mentioned this during the week when you were talking with Jeremy Werner, but like the second-year transfer quarterback thing starting to pop a little bit with Luke Altmaier.
Yep.
Like a good Luke Altmaier is pretty good. Like I think a good Luke Altmaier can get you a decent ways. We've seen the bad too. Like there's a little volatility there, but the good version, I might take it over just about every team in the Big Ten aside from like 3 or 4, right? So just another really good one for Illinois. Now they get to take it to Happy Valley this weekend. I'm excited to watch that game.
And that game, again, that game opened at like 17.5, 18.5. And you and I both hit Illinois, right?
I hit it at 18.5, I think. Yeah.
I hit it at 17.5. It doesn't feel like these teams are that far apart. As you mentioned, that game is going to be in prime time opposite Alabama, Georgia. But I think we think that's going to be a game. It's down to 17 right now as the betting line, but this is 2 top 20 teams. I think 17 is like preseason perception, but like the way they've played and Penn State just stomped somebody. I think they're much closer than 17 points.
I think so too. And I'm also excited we can maybe talk about this more on Thursday. And I wonder how much this might come out for Illinois with their media this week, but it was very much a talking point 2 weeks ago when Illinois played Kansas about the blender that Andy Koltonicki put Aaron Henry in last year when Kansas beat Illinois. And now we get Aaron Henry versus Andy Koltonicki part 2.
Yeah. Oh, excited for that. And the team that I am excited about is Ohio State because I feel like we can talk about them on the show again. Here's the thing. People know that you and I started our careers covering Ohio State. And we have I feel like we have barely talked about Ohio State for the first month of Kings of the North.
Very little Ohio State conversation. What we have discussed has mostly been like, man, isn't Jeremiah Smith really good? But that's kind of the extent of it. Yeah. And
we had Will Howard on the show, and we had a great interview with him, and we were happy to have him. And it's just because Ohio State had a lousy first 4 weeks of a schedule. Mac blowout, off week, and then they blew out Marshall this past week. And so Ohio State is tied for 3rd in the country at 52.3 points per game. They're behind Ole Miss and Tennessee and tied with Miami. but they get a trip to Michigan State this week, and then they get Iowa, and then it's on. So like, it's just, they haven't played anybody that's mattered. So it's Ohio State made the schedule. It's like, no one made their schedule for them. They did have Washington on originally and then backed off. And like we said, they're going to play Texas to open next year. Usually Ohio State, as a matter of course, as a rule, plays a good non-conference opponent. It's what they want to do. They just didn't this year. And the result is that a team that, until Michigan's run the last 3 years, had dominated Northern football, has been mostly absent from the show Kings of the North. And I just think this is the North's best national title contender at the moment. And I would like to talk about them more on this show because they're really going to matter. And they had like 4 weeks off from us analyzing them, but now it's over.
Now it is over. Yeah. By the way, the Ohio State Iowa game was just announced. It's going to be a 3:30 CBS kick on October
3:30 on CBS. Okay. We'll be aware. All right. When we come back, we will do our top 11.5 rankings. We'll have our South cram-o-meter, and then we will run through the rest of the 13 teams that we have not brushed on so far. We'll do all of that next on Kings of the North. Welcome back to Kings of the North. Our top 11.5 rankings. I don't know about this, Landis. I feel like we might need a better way to talk about who we think the best teams are. Something jazzier. I don't know. Like, do we want to do playoff rankings every week? Do we want to? I think we need to do it. I don't feel good about the conversations that I'm like trying to think about as I try to analyze Ole Miss. I hate Ole Miss. Ole Miss has me on tilt. Old Mill, like, do we want to, is it too nuanced? Do we just need to go back to dunks and threes? I don't know. Do you like top 11.5?
I think it's fine. I would also be fine with just doing playoff brackets every week. It's practically the same exercise. I guess a little more thought goes into the playoff bracket thing.
I feel like playoff bracket every week is jazzier. We'll have to talk about it. Maybe we can ask the people, see what they think. All right, let's do my top 11.5 rankings. I don't love it. People are yelling at me. I don't know. Texas is definitely number one. I moved Ohio State up to 2 because I had Tennessee number 2 last week, and then Tennessee was like okay against a team that benched its quarterback. So Texas 1, Ohio State 2, Penn State 3. I'll stand behind it. And again, people were like, why did I have Penn State ahead of Georgia last week when I penalized Georgia for having a rough game against a lesser opponent? And Penn State had that with Bowling Green. And then Bowling Green went down and like also gave Texas A&M some problems. Bowling Green would beat Kentucky. So you can cram that in your cram hole. So I'm not afraid to have Penn State 3, Alabama 4, Tennessee 5, Oregon 6, Ole Miss 7, Georgia 8, Utah 9, who I didn't have in here last week, Iowa State 10, who I think is underranked. Like Iowa's good and Iowa State beat them. Iowa State's actually 18th in the AP poll, and I think that's too low. So I like having them in my top 10. Miami 11. And then the team I'm keeping my eye on, I had the last 2 weeks been keeping my eye on Nebraska. I'm not saying that Indiana should be ranked, but I'm watching them, brother. They are 27th in the AP. Second team in receiving votes. So I got my eye on the Hoosiers.
You should have your eye on the Hoosiers. I think it would be reasonable to have Indiana ranked. I don't have them in my top 11.5 this week. I have Texas, Ohio State, Tennessee. I moved Tennessee up because Oklahoma, I think, is not a particularly good team, but Oklahoma's defense is pretty good. And I thought it was actually mildly impressive that Tennessee like pivoted its offensive strategy and just like, well, we can't throw it, we're just going to run it. And then they just kind of control the game. And I think Tennessee's defense is good. I'd like more data points against the good offense, but I think it's a pretty good defense they have down there. So I have Tennessee 3, Alabama 4, Georgia 5, Miami 6. I moved Utah up to 7. After getting a really good win at Oklahoma State. I have Oregon 8, Penn State 9, Ole Miss 10, and I put Louisville in. Louisville unbeaten, beat Georgia Tech this week, I think perhaps is the best team in the ACC. We'll see. And then I have Michigan in the 11.5 spot because I was totally ready to write Michigan off after what I saw against Texas, and they impressed me against USC. So I think Michigan is back in the can this team sneak into a playoff kind of conversation if it can find a way to get itself to 10 wins, which I didn't think was possible after Texas.
No, that's a good eyeball by you with Michigan. Betting odds to win the ACC: Miami plus 125, Clemson plus 240, Louisville plus 450, so 4.5 to 1 to win the ACC, and then nobody else is better than 20 to 1. So Pitt, at least I'd been talking about it. My Syracuse bet, what are you going to do? But I talked about Pitt being whatever. I found Pitt for 100 to 1 and hit that middle of last week. Now they're here at 45 to 1. But I don't know. Could Pitt win the ACC? Do you think
I
Pitt
think
could
so.
win the ACC? Yeah.
I think Pitt could. And Louisville does have to. So Louisville plays at Notre Dame this week, and then it does play Miami at home, and it plays at Clemson in November, first week of November. So
yeah,
I think they look pretty good right now, but they'll get tested more.
Okay. Those are our top 11.5 rankings. We'll talk it out, see if we have a better system for this. The cram-o-meter, no better system for this. This is proprietary. If you hear anyone else talking about a South cram-o-meter, please tell us, because we have trademarked this. I'm at a 931 for the cram-o-meter this week. And a chunk of it is because Missouri almost lost to Vanderbilt. In that game, the game went to overtime, and it was decided by Vanderbilt missing a field goal in the second overtime after Missouri had made its field goal. But Missouri had missed 3 field goals in regulation. Missouri was 3 of 6 on field goals on the day, and Vandy was 2 of 4. So in a game where you combine to go 5 of 10 on your field goals, and the team that is viewed as the worst team in the league takes a team that everybody has picked for the playoff into overtime, you can cram it on that. And then also, by the way, Bowling Green went down and gave Texas A&M everything they could handle. I thought the Oklahoma-Tennessee game did not live up to expectations. And when you bench my Heisman pick, I'm going to tell you to cram it, Oklahoma. So I don't know. I guess I was out over my skis on Oklahoma. Maybe maybe I should cram it myself. The Doug cram-o-meter is also a 931 for me this week for picking Jackson Arnold to win the Heisman. But my goodness, what happened to Oklahoma? I was higher than most. So it's not like the whole world thought Oklahoma was going to be good. But is that catastrophic? That in your huge SEC debut, you have your 5-star second-year quarterback that basically made you tell Dylan Gabriel to get lost, and you have to bench him? Is that catastrophe?
Well, I think they like the freshman that they played, so I don't know if it's catastrophe. It's not a great look. You talked me into Oklahoma too. I had retweaked my final preseason playoff projections, and I think I included Oklahoma because I was like, oh, Doug's pretty high on them, and this schedule looks all right. And that offense is really bad. So I think their defense is quite good. But yeah, Jackson Arnold, I don't think is it. It's all right. It's okay. The other thing you can include in your cram-o-meter is Auburn losing to Arkansas, and Auburn is fully on tilt. And Hugh Freeze is a scumbag, so I like when bad things happen to him. So that's nice.
Check the phone. The call's coming from inside of the house, and the call says, your coach sucks. Wow, Auburn. Oh, that's the great thing. It's who is the Auburn of the North? I feel like all the Auburns in the North got their stuff together. That's the thing. That is the thing. I think that is a differentiator between the North and the South. How many programs are there in the North that think they are or should be good at college football and are dumpster fires? What is the equivalent of Florida and or Auburn in the North? Because in the North, when teams don't succeed, it's sort of well, I don't know that anybody ever thought that they were supposed to be a top tier team. They didn't have national title aspirations. But Auburn's we are here to win, and we blow. Do we do that up here? Who does that?
Is Wisconsin better be careful to not be in that territory kind of thing?
That they were dunks and threes. Mostly they were all dunks. They were we are standing in the
They were
paint.
underhand free throws. So
And then they
And
were
they
like,
said, "What's this? A 3-point line?" Oh,
you guys want to try to take somebody off the dribble? And they were like, well, we're all 6'10" and 400 pounds, but I guess we could try to take somebody off the dribble. And they're just dribbling it off their foot. But not yet. Not yet.
Not yet.
And hiring Luke Fickell is not hiring Hugh Freeze. Right? I mean, you understand, like, this is, oh my God, please, dude, you just gave me the eyebrows that are like, I don't know, Luke Fickell might be the Hugh Freeze.
Oh, no,
please
sorry.
tell me you didn't give me those.
That was an involuntary movement. If I did that, I don't think
Oh
hiring
my
Luke
God.
Fickell is like hiring Luke Freeze or Hugh Freeze.
How far out is Landis on the air raid experiment in Wisconsin? He just called Luke Fickell the Hugh Freeze of the North. No, but Luke Fickell's a good human being, so he's not that.
That's right.
But that is so. What's your cram-o-meter? Mine was a 931. What's your cram?
I'm 889.
889. Okay, I feel like I need to actually track the cram-o-meter. Maybe we can make a how like one of those, right? Like where's the cram-o-meter going to land? Ding. Bill's at an 889. All right, let's run through the rest of our teams that we have not talked about yet, and we're starting with Rutgers. Mike, is that right? Is Rutgers right? Are they first up on the thing? True freshman Sam Brown, 14 carries for 60 yards against Virginia Tech. Kyle Monunga, 26 carries for 84. Sam Brown is a true freshman. He's 6'1". He's 222 pounds. And do you know where he's from, Landis?
Yeah, he's from Philly. And he's not a true freshman.
Is he a redshirt freshman?
No.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
For real?
Yeah. He is
my emotional
22,
story of the
23,
redshirt freshman.
Yeah, this is his third. He might be a redshirt sophomore, but it's his third year.
He's a redshirt. He's a true freshman in his heart. For real?
Yeah.
Actual mistakes. Let's just pretend he's a true freshman. What a story. Sam Brown. What a story as a true freshman. But you know what's nice? To have a backup running back. You already have one of the best running backs in the country. And then you have another guy that you can go to who you can put in and like does almost as well, which is like a huge thing. So just a lot, like we haven't talked much about it, like a really good Rutgers win at Virginia Tech. Up early, looked like they were going to dominate. Virginia Tech came back, tied it. Rutgers kind of gave it up, but then like a drive for a game-winning field goal and then a stop at the end. Like Greg Shannon was really excited and blew it on the true freshman.
It's all right.
Hosting Washington Friday at 8. The Friday night game this week is Rutgers versus Washington from the Pacific to Piscataway, the new Big Ten motto. Super interested to see this Washington offense against this Rutgers defense, Landis.
It's going to be pretty fun, I think. I've said before, I think Washington is better than people are giving them credit for, and I'm excited to see them kind of put that on display on Friday night.
So something we're less excited for is Purdue.
Yeah.
38-21 loss at Oregon State. Devin Mockabee, 16 for 168, but all the things was like, okay, let's see who could be physical and run the ball. Oregon State ran all over Purdue. Purdue ran for 263 yards on 30 carries. Oregon State ran for 341 yards on 57 carries. They were like, we're just going to keep running because you cannot stop it. Kydron Jenkins, like who you've had questions about moving to linebacker, had 16 tackles. I think that might have been the most in the power conference this week. Dylan Thieneman had 14 tackles, but it's like, hey, their best linebacker and best safety had 30 combined tackles. Why? Because the running backs were getting that far. None of the running backs were getting tackled by the front four. Did you see the pick that Hudson Card threw as he threw for less than 60 yards?
It's like the only thing I saw from the game was somebody called it a kick six, and I thought was really funny.
Hudson Card threw a swing pass to Reggie Love. The defender in between tipped it, deflected it so that it had a downward arc. It hit Reggie Love in the leg, like in the calf, and bounced straight back to the defender who had tipped it, who caught it and ran it in for a touchdown.
Yeah.
So
that's when you know things aren't going your way. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Like really not good. And like Oregon State, I think like went for it from their own 30 on 4th and 1 on their first drive and didn't get it. So Purdue took over with awesome field position, had their own 3rd and 1, and Devin Mockabee fumbled on 3rd and 1. So this is the thing. It gets like, what are you supposed to do? It's like, I can't believe Purdue lost that game. It's like they got the ball at the 30-yard line, short field. They handed the ball to their best guy who ran for 168 yards in the game, and he fumbled on 3rd and 1. So I don't know, like have your best guy not fumble, but just like I've tried my best. I've tried my best with Purdue since the preseason. And maybe the consensus is right, and they are the worst team in the Big Ten because this was not great.
It was not great. You know who was great? Penn State. Penn State won 56-0 against Kent State. So if you're keeping track at home, that was a 71-0 loss for Kent State to Tennessee, and then they backed it up with a 56-0 loss to Penn State. Rough time for the Golden Flashes. Andy Koltonicki was fully in his bag in this game. I think almost to a fault because they turned the ball over on the first drive because Bo Pribula threw an interception. But I think Andy Koltonicki has found his gadget player, and it is tight end Tyler Warren, who played quarterback in high school. He is, James Franklin after the game called him the best tight end in the country. I think Tyler Warren at the very least might be the best tight end that no one's talking about because he is very good. He's incredibly versatile. He's a great receiver. He's a really good blocker. In this game, he took a direct snap out of the Wildcat for 16 yards. He caught a touchdown pass, including one of the craziest one-hand catches I've ever seen in my life, just like fully reaching back behind him with one hand to catch a ball along the sideline. And then he threw a touchdown pass to one of the running backs. I can't remember which one. So he was doing it all for Penn State in this game. Maybe this was just a name your score, let's have some fun kind of thing for Andy Koltonicki, but coming off of a week off, he was doing some fun stuff with that offense. And also Abdul Carter got his first sack of the season. So the Heisman Trophy campaign is still alive for Abdul Carter now that he's on the board after 3 games with 1 sack. Yeah.
Congratulations to you on that. Nick Singleton, I guess, was the guy who caught the touchdown. So we talked about we think a 17, 18 point line for Penn State, Illinois is too high, but do you think Penn State's pretty good?
Yeah, I think Penn State's pretty good. And I think Drew Aller, if you look at some of the numbers and the shots downfield and air yards and yards per attempt and average depth of target, all that stuff, it is where you want it to be, I think, for him coming off last year.
It's one of the things about this, Illinois is a very competently coached winning football team. And whatever happens, the winner of this game deserves a lot of credit between Penn State and Illinois. So when the line's 17, it's just oh, well, what if Penn State wins by 24? It's Illinois was never any good. And that's not true. Illinois is good at football, and Penn State might be really good at football. So this is going to be a big one. We're going to be talking about this one a lot this week. Maryland also for you?
Yeah, Maryland beat Villanova 38-20. Handle the game, I think, even more than that score suggests. Villanova scored late to make it a little closer. Ty Felton, man, he's an animal. 14 receptions, 157 yards, and a touchdown in this game for Maryland. He and Billy Edwards are really locked in, the quarterback for Maryland. Ty Felton now is number 2 in the country with 41 receptions. He's number 3 with 604 receiving yards, and he's number 2 in receptions per game, number 3 in receiving yards per game. It's basically like him and Billy Edwards making that thing go, but in a way that's pretty exciting and I think pretty reliable. And I think maybe Maryland's now 3-1. Really interesting game for Maryland this weekend. Go into Bloomington.
I'm thinking about it. Should I go? Do you think I should go? Because I was thinking about maybe going to Nebraska at Purdue, and now I don't think there's a reason to go to that game. Is there a reason to go to Maryland and Indiana?
I think so, because it's either Maryland pulls an upset. It's oh, look at this, Maryland, and also is Indiana really ready for this? Or it's Coach Siggs lays the hammer down in his Big Ten debut and is going to say something worth being there. I think it could be a game worth going to. Yeah.
If I go, I'm definitely doing this in the post-game news conference. I'm going to offer him one. Coach. All right. Washington for me. Will Rogers, 8 touchdowns, no picks on the season. They beat Northwestern 24-5. And my guy, Denzel Boston, breakout game, first career 100-yard receiving game, 17 for 121 and 2 TDs. Really excited to see Washington against Rutgers. Well, everybody should be watching that on a Friday night. Meanwhile, Northwestern, not so much with the good football. Their whole offense, Cam Porter, their running back, didn't play, which meant they had no offense. They had a series with 1st and goal from the 4 and 1st and goal from the 2, and they got 3 points out of those 2 trips. So 1st and goal from the 4, stop, kick a field goal. 1st and goal from the 2, and actually then it got to the 1 because in the first play there was a penalty. So 1st and goal at the 1, incompletion, run for nothing, incompletion. So they're trying it with Jack Lausch. I think they have real issues on the offensive line, and then their running back didn't play, and they scored 5 points. So just a non-functional offense that Northwestern needs to find something. And Cam Porter being healthy will help, but that was not good. Not good for Northwestern.
Not good. You know what was good? Colorado and Baylor playing
yeah.
an absolutely insane game on Saturday night. We were talking about it as it was happening. We weren't really able to watch it live, but Colorado wins 38-31 in overtime. It gets to overtime because Shedeur Sanders throws a ridiculous Hail Mary to Lashonte Wester, rolling to his left 43 yards. Travis Hunter, after the game, said that he told the coaching staff to put him on the opposite side of that because he feel like he would get all the attention, and then Lashonte Wester might actually get a one-on-one there, and boy did he. And really bad defense from Baylor, like the kind of defense that I think should probably get Dave Aranda fired. But that hasn't happened as we have this conversation on a Monday afternoon. But just a really nice comeback win for Colorado. Travis Hunter forces a fumble on the goal line in overtime as Baylor is going in to tie the game. So Travis Hunter finishes with 7 receptions for 130 yards, but he also has 3 tackles and wins the game by forcing a fumble on the goal line. He should be on everyone's Heisman Trophy ballot. I don't care what Colorado's record is this year. It is absolutely insane what he is doing. Deion Sanders was asked after the game where he would rank this one, and he said, "I don't rank games. I just love the W's," which I thought was a good answer.
Oh, that's a good T-shirt. Yeah. Okay. I just love the W's. Kansas,
as we've discussed, lost at West Virginia. Kansas is now 1-3. 3 straight losses.
Worst record in the North. I tweeted out all records of all of our Northern teams. Purdue's 1-2 and Kansas is 1-3. 2 worst Northern teams by record.
It is a team. We've talked a lot about Illinois and making winning plays. This is a team that's not really making any, which is like, it's interesting to see a Lance Leipold team, I think, play that way. Cause I think you and I agree that we think Lance Leipold is one of the best coaches in college football, let alone the North. And, his team is just not playing, I think, particularly well coached right now. There's a lot of questions about the offense and whether or not Jeff Grimes was the right hire there for OC. There hasn't been a whole lot there. I think that's inspiring confidence. Jalen Daniels is not right. So Kansas lost to Illinois with a post-game win expectancy of like north of 80%. Lost to UNLV with a post-game win expectancy of above 50%, and then lost to West Virginia after being up 2 scores with 5 minutes left in the game and didn't win this game either. There's just a lot that Kansas needs to get fixed. Maybe they will. Luke Grimm, who's been around for a while at Kansas, said, we've been in situations worse than this. When I got here, we sucked. We've come from far worse than where we're at right now, so we're not worried. But Kansas very much has to get it turned around.
Just as always, just like congratulations on succeeding and raising expectations so everybody can yell at you for being 1-3 when there was a time when not being 0-12 would have been a success at Kansas. So, but doesn't feel like they're on tilt, but they still have the same quarterback. They're just making, like you said it well, they're making losing plays. Making winning plays, Cincinnati, congratulations on tying your season win total from last year. Bearcats were 3-9 last year. They're 3-1 now after shutting out Houston. It's their first shutout of like a power conference team since 1998 for Cincinnati. Brendan Sorsby is just like, he's such a winning quarterback for them right now. He was 10 of 11 for 136 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first half. And it's just like, like make some winning plays, take the throws that are there. Like he said, I felt poised, and it's just like, it's a really good, there's a lot of good things happening with Cincinnati football right now. And after a 3-9 to be at 3-1 is really good for Cincinnati. Minnesota for you.
Yeah, not so good vibes here. Lost 31-14 to Iowa, was leading 14-7 at halftime. Then got outscored 24-0 in the second half. We've talked about Kaleb Johnson and the difficulties that he presented Minnesota's defense, and there's a lot there. I think there's like a pretty poor tackling game, I think, for Minnesota on that side of the ball. I think the bigger thing, though, for Minnesota now is it's got some offensive line issues. The offense was looking pretty good in the first half, and in the second half, it could not protect Max Brosmer. He was just kind of under duress and couldn't do much of anything throwing the ball, and they couldn't run the ball for the entire game and haven't really run it all that well all year, which is like, I think part of the reason why Darius Taylor has had to play some receiver, because it's like you got to get the ball in that guy's hands, and running him into a wall of defenders isn't going to do anybody any good. So Minnesota's got some serious offensive line stuff to try to figure out here on the fly. And also, like, PJ Fleck is 2-9 in his last 11 games against power opponents. And one of those wins is a game it should have lost last year against Iowa if Cooper DeJean gets his punt return touchdown. So not a great stretch here for PJ.
But I thought they were figuring it out the last couple weeks. They had back-to-back shutouts against lesser opponents, but I thought like the whole we have to throw to set up the run. It felt like they were, and then Iowa was a dose. But also Kaleb Johnson will bring a lot of people back to reality.
Yeah, the throw at the run it thing too is like I don't think it's actually happening. I think it's just the thing that PJ Fleck is saying to help explain why their run game is not very good, but it's not like they're throwing it all over people. They're throwing it more because they have to, but then it's also not setting up anything because they're not running the ball well.
At Michigan, home versus USC, the next two. Like they got to get this figured out. And by the way, didn't help like, their tight 19-17 opener against North Carolina that they should have won. Then North Carolina got dropped 70 on them by James Madison. And it was like, Minnesota scored 17 against North Carolina. James Madison scored 70. Iowa State, history in the making.
That's right. You set the table during the week. Matt Campbell looking to tie Dan McCarney for 56 wins, tying for the most in Iowa history. He got it with a 52-7 win against Arkansas State. Just sharp, I think, pretty sharp for Iowa State coming off of a week off. Probably the biggest thing for Iowa State was getting its rushing attack going. Now, how much does that actually mean against Arkansas State, which got run all over by Michigan the week before? I don't know, but I think there's something to be said for building a little bit of confidence. Iowa State had 175 yards and 1 touchdown in its first 2 games combined. It had 237 yards rushing and 5 touchdowns in this game against Arkansas State. It was very much by committee. Carson Hansen had 9 carries for 58 yards and 2 touchdowns. Abu Sama only had 7 carries for 30 yards, but I think looked okay, at least carrying the ball, even if he didn't go off. So they have to run the ball, I think, to be competitive in the Big 12, right? I don't think you could put it all on Rocco Becht and the 2 receivers. So if they can get a little something going there, I think this game would maybe be the first step in that happening for them.
At Houston versus Baylor the next 2 weeks, I feel like they're just going to lurk. As we've said, they finished with Utah and Kansas State are their last 2 games of the year. And they just might lurk for a while and let people not know how good they are. I think they're pretty good. And I think Iowa has a chance to show how good Iowa State is. That could wind up being a really good win for Iowa State. So last 2 teams were our 2 northern teams that were off this past week. Wisconsin comes back hosting USC, 3:30 on CBS. I hope Michigan can't throw and they beat USC. I hope there's a plan. Wisconsin should have been able to glean some stuff here. And they do have the depth chart out. Braden Locke, QB1, Mabry Matoyer, the true freshman, QB2. So they're not turning it over to the young guy. Not that anybody expected that. But this is like Wisconsin has to compete. Has to compete this weekend. And the other one is Oregon at UCLA. 11 Eastern on Fox on Saturday night, and then they'll have Michigan State and Ohio State. So as much as we said, like, it'd be nice to talk about Ohio State, we talked about Oregon the first couple of weeks because they had an issue. It feels like they fixed that issue, which was interior offensive line play. And so now I'm sort of looking forward to, I'm not going to wish it into existence, but like maybe it's time to talk about good Oregon. And so like take a week, refresh yourself, and let's see what the Ducks are all about, right?
Yeah, I mean they should hammer UCLA. If we're talking about good Oregon, then they should hammer UCLA this week.
Yes. And Ohio State, Oregon is going to be here before you know it. All right, that'll do it for this Monday version of Kings of the North. We appreciate you guys joining us every Monday at noon live here on YouTube. If you're listening back on a podcast, we appreciate you joining us there. If you want to drop a review, some reviews. If you're a podcast listener and you want to drop a review on Apple Podcasts, that would be helpful. And I never ask for 5-star reviews because if you don't think we're 5-star, then constructive criticism, we're here for it. But just like engagement, getting the word out, all of that is good for KOTN because we want to be good, but we also want to be better. So if you think we can be better, tell us. Thumb, subscribe, tell a friend. Thanks as always to our producer, Mike Urostowski, Penguin Mike, for making us look good and sound good. We'll see you guys on Tuesday when Dan Wetzel will be here. For now, he is Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.